Hi, I'm Ellen Windemuth from the WaterBear network. I beat the often path my entire life by hiring myself for the jobs I wanted to do.
Welcome back to the Beat the Often Path podcast. I'm your host, Ross Palmer. Today, we've got an incredible guest for you. Ellen Windemuth is the founder and CEO of WaterBear Network, a free environmental content streaming platform that Fast Company called Netflix for the planet. Ellen is well known for producing My Octopus Teacher, the incredible documentary that won this year's BAFTA and Oscar for Best Documentary Feature. WaterBear has impressive partners with over 100 charities and NGOs taking part, including WWF, Greenpeace, and many more. And she also has support of Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex. They're shining a spotlight on the most critical issues facing the planet today, and it's just a fantastic initiative. Beyond that, Ellen's personal journey is remarkable, as she embraced entrepreneurship as a way of building a life and career of meaning. So here's Ellen Windemuth of WaterBear. Okay, hiring yourself for the jobs that you wanted to do. That is a great hooky clickbaity intro. You got it. So what exactly does that mean, or how did you come up with that philosophy?
Well, it sort of life came up with that option for me because when I was a young woman just out of college and I went to film school, and out of film school, the only job available to me was one of a secretary, but I couldn't type. I discovered that I really, I was never going to get the kind of work I wanted if I didn't create it for myself. And I sort of scraped and scratched away at, using any type of capability I had to get into the right place for a job that would maybe feel good for someone like me. The only thing I had at the time besides a college and a university degree was the fact that I spoke 4 languages. And then I started building it all together. So as soon as I got a job in a television company, I thought, yeah, television's the right place for me. But I was very, very uncomfortable within the corporate structure. So the first thing I did when I could was I hired myself for the job that nobody would give me, which was to do international co-productions.
That's incredible. And you've touched on, without even realizing it, although maybe it's self-selecting because I sought you out because I'm so impressed with what you've done. But without even realizing it, you've touched upon so many of the values that we try to share on this show and so many of the things that I think are important. And one of the main topics that I wanted to talk with you about today was this concept of permission. I have a daughter myself, and I am a big advocate of this theory that I don't want her to seek permission and that nobody should seek permission. And what you described is much more empowering, building the life, recognizing that people aren't going to give you the things that you want. And obviously, if you're disadvantaged in any way, if you're a woman, it's going to be even tougher to get a lot of these things. So already I'm super intrigued and excited by this conversation. So, and another point is, they say dress for the job you want, not the job that you have, which kind of ties into what you said. So how can people build a life for themselves knowing that nobody else cares what happens to them?
Or knowing that waiting for permission is waiting for Godot, right?
Right.
Especially, I think the first thing to do is watch yourself in a conventional environment. There are many people and many of my friends who are very, very happy at the Warners of the world or the Discoveries of the world or the Netflixes of this world. Watch and see how you do in the system that is already laid out. When you find that you're comfortable, become an expert mover and create opportunities within that system. When you find you're not comfortable, because as in my case, I do have maybe an excessive sense of justice that is very often, quite uncomfortable within a corporate environment. You become very clear very quickly, I cannot thrive in this environment. and I have to leave this environment and find a way to hire myself for what I want to do.
That makes so much sense. And I love that your progression has clear steps. So in the beginning of your career, you said, I'm very limited by what society has placed in front of me of what I'm supposed to be doing. But then you found something more creative and you said, in television, I can express myself and I get more creative there. But of course, that wasn't where you stopped. You could be making reality TV shows right now. You could just be fully embracing the world of television as it exists, but you've chosen to do something else and go even beyond that. So how did that progression go for you?
Well, it was certainly not an easy thing. In the beginning, due to the fact that I spoke languages, people didn't want me to be too creative. They wanted me to help them sell rights of television shows or documentaries or, make deals. And so I found myself traveling the world making deals and realizing, that appeals to a part of me, but not all of me. That's, the thing you kind of find in your progression. You sort of say, okay, I found something that I like to do. I'm doing it within a company. Don't love that. Half of me likes it. Okay, that's not bad. Let me take the paycheck, keep learning, see what happens. Then came the other half, and I said to my then bosses, would they let me become a producer, and or would they let me finance co-productions? And they laughed me out the door. That's perfect, right? That's a perfect time when someone laughs at you. I'm in the wrong place. What I said, reverberated unfavorably with the people that I'm with. Out. Do it. So that's what I did.
And it ties back to the subject of this whole show because it was documentaries like Food Inc. and Earthlings that changed my view on eating meat, for example, on our relationship to the world. I love the kind of documentaries and films that you make. They have deep personal meaning for me. And when you learn these things, the first thing you want to do is just shout it from the rooftops. You want to say, hey, everybody, check out Earthlings, check out Food Inc. And you're met immediately with this almost religious resistance of no, 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 no. People don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to entertain any of this. So it makes it very tough. And the question I've asked over and over again is how do we actually build the kind of change that we want to see, knowing that so many people are resistant actively to that kind of change?
Yeah. It's amazing you say that because I've really spent my whole life working on that. And the quick answer is what you have to do changes all the time because the mood in the world changes all the time. So, at one point, maybe Al Gore is successful making a documentary about climate change that is super scary. But if you put that documentary out right now, nobody would be able to stand watching it because we know too much already. I think the reason why a lot of people don't watch documentaries is because they're in a state of twilight knowing. Twilight knowing is, I kind of know about food, but I don't want to watch Food Inc. because I can't face having to learn something that I can't deal with, right? Or I don't have the bandwidth to deal with another show on climate change. I don't want to deal with a film about climate refugees or, Ukrainian refugees. So yes, documentaries can strike a chord, and twilight knowers tend to then watch the Kardashians or tend to go and self-soothe with a bunch of beers and video games. However, I have been working on captivating that audience in another way. And I think that our film, My Octopus Teacher, is a good example of that.
Beautiful
because
film.
The people who ended up watching My Octopus Teacher were people who never, ever watched documentaries. Now, that's the audience that interests me in many ways. We did not challenge the Twilight knowers into anything scary, right? We didn't tell people things that they can't bear to hear. we gave them a story that in some way reminded them of our relationship with nature and how animals take care of their own habitat. You know what happens to the octopus, of course, in the end, is that once the octopus has had her babies, she leaves the stage, right? She says, okay, here I am. I'm handing myself over to let the next generation live in my clean, beautiful underwater habitat. So I think that's an example for a documentary that worked. But it's of course, you knew I was going to say this. It's of course much more complicated than that. Sometimes a documentary like that works for lots and lots of different people because it strikes a chord, and you don't have to make a very big deal of the fact that every second breath we take comes from the oceans, right? People kind of get that from the way the oceans are treated through Craig Foster's cinematography and Roger's cinematography. And they also get the reverence for nature from the way Craig deals with his environment. So that, I think, is a really positive example. But there are films that can spell things out more, that may not be watched by as many people because they're more challenging. They might have more challenging images, but there are other ways to get people to watch them. For instance, this week on the 4th of October, we came out with a film called The Letter. It's a YouTube original starring the Pope, and it's about climate change. So this very difficult subject of climate change, which, the film does not have a happy ending. This is not a film full of Hollywood moments, but it is a film starring the Pope. So people are already watching it like crazy because the Pope actually anchors the viewer in the film and they can actually see it. That's a second way. There are many other ways. There is humor. I think using humor in films gets people to, have that water cooler moment the next day. Thank God we're having water cooler moments again, right? We've got our office. Yes. So cool. We get to exchange information.
Yes.
So that is fun. When something's funny, you have your water cooler day the next day. When something is really eye-opening, you can have a water cooler moment with a couple of colleagues. So there are a lot of techniques on how to dress up a film to actually get people to watch it.
And I know you're focusing on circularity, and there's a community circularity, and I think two others WaterBear is focusing on primarily.
I mean, our stories really tell stories or inspiring stories surrounding all 17 Sustainable Development Goals, but we have these 4 big quadrants. And the big ones are biodiversity, climate, community, and circularity. Those are the almost quadrants, but in each of these quadrants, you'll find loads of the values of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals inside, packed in them. So because WaterBear is free, and because we're producing at the moment only short form originals, we're able to buy finished films that are longer, and we're able to build tentpole campaigns around them. So when you just brought up your experience with PETA, we just launched a film called Slay on WaterBear. It's a 90-minute film about a fashionista who, after years and years of a very glamorous life, she gets a dog, and she really loves this dog. And her relationship with her dog makes her think about where that, God knows, $30,000 handbag she is wearing maybe comes from, and where those shoes comes from that she wears and that she has 200 pairs of. So she decides to explore the world. She travels all over the world to see where leather comes from and where wool comes from. And she assumed that high-end luxury brands have a very luxury, super deluxe distribution network. That is not the case. So that film is a massive eye-opener. I really suggest you watch it, because people who give these incredibly opulent gifts to their wives and girlfriends from these high-end fashion brands, you really need to see this, because it really will change your mind forever.
I have no doubt. I have no doubt. And you mentioned, so My Octopus Teacher, obviously you won an Oscar for that, so congratulate you. It's been appreciated on the world stage. And it's a very surreptitious, it's a sneaky film, like you described. It's a film that is unlike many others in that the story and the plot and the way that it moves is just different. And it's one of those films that you turn it on and you find yourself unable to look away, even though you can't really describe why. Like, what is propelling me to the next scene? I don't know, but I can't take my eyes off of it. And at the end, I agree that you can't help but notice those little things sneaking their way into your brain, those just little quiet thoughts, but they're not overt. It's not something that you're bashing people over the head with. So knowing that things have changed and that our approach must change, which I think is a brilliant concept, and also knowing that it's 0 hour, that there are maybe 3 years left, that time is of the essence. How do we jibe that fact with the fact that culturally right now, everybody seems to be so burnt out on doom and gloom, and we're heading into another recession of unknown length after coming out of a pandemic, and all of the world just feels terrible and awful, and all of the news seems bad constantly. And I think people are just so burnt out on that. So how do we square this extreme urgency with the fact that all of this just seems like more bad news to people who don't want to think about it right now?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say about bad news is there is a lot of bad news, but news makes money on milking bad news. So we went through 4 years seeing a president whose face I really, really never wanted to see on a screen in the first place. And now we're spending 4 more years. Then we spent 3 years on COVID. I really didn't need to know 5 times a day all the stuff they were repeating again and again about COVID. And now something very similar is happening with the atrocious war in the Ukraine. So systemic to news is that it bashes you over the head over and over and over again because the advertisers make revenues that way. You need to know that so that you can take a step back from that and say, you know what, maybe I don't have to leave the news on all day long on my radio or on my television, because it's going to be bad and they're going to be milking me for advertising dollars all day long, right? That said, it's very important to understand what's going on. But, getting a really good blog and reading a good paper on your phone is perfectly sufficient. That's how I feel about the news. Documentaries should be counter-programming to the news. So documentaries should not slide into the same dark, slithery place that I feel our national news is now in, which is, making money on our fear. We need to be inspiring, and we need to be educational in a very entertaining way. We need to assume that people care in order to do good work. The news does not assume that people care. They're bashing you over the head all the time, right? We assume you care because we care, and everyone we know cares. And that means you have a completely different approach to, in a way, the love and the nurturing that you put into a film, even if it's a low budget, really short film.
Do you have any personal stories of people that are rolling in whom your work has impacted, they've changed? I mean, do you get a sense of making a positive difference on a daily basis as a result of the things you've been doing?
Every day, our Zendesk is full of emails from people who say, I have been suffering from terrible climate anxiety, and since I've been watching WaterBear, it's gone. People who say, I've been overwhelmed and depressed because I can't get authentic information in a safe way, and I found WaterBear and I feel good. That happens all the time. People write to us and say, through you, I connected with, this and this NGO, be it Sea Shepherd or Jane Goodall, and I found my passion. My passion is giraffes or sharks, or my passion is air pollution, or my passion is ocean. That is fantastic, the way that works.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And what do you think about the concept of eco-capitalism or building better products? Because this is a thing that I intuitively believe in, but sometimes I read criticism of that. They say capitalism is itself the problem. Do you believe that eco-capitalism is a part of the solution here for some of these problems?
There's a report, an economic report, that recently came out that said that US corporations are putting $17 trillion a year into more sustainable R&D and more sustainable products. So it is a very real world, and businesses are moving a lot faster than, say, politicians, right? Politicians at this moment have slowed down so much that it seems the big onus is now on the world's mayors, right? The world's mayors are able to better protect their parishes, right? Their cities, their towns against the environmental threats than any national politician. So I think these are trends that are really strong and growing.
Yeah, because it's like it may not be perfect and there may be problems with the system, but again, we have to take steps. We have to do something. And when I read a lot of those criticisms, they'll say, oh, eco-capitalism is a fad. It doesn't solve anything. Capitalism is the problem. Then I always think, well, the logical conclusion from that train of thought is let's just do nothing, which is not what we want. So I always think let's do something. Anything is better than nothing. Is that something that you share?
That businesses are able to move faster than any other institution in the world. So also that we just discussed speed. So who can match the necessary speed? Business. Do a ton of businesses greenwash and do a horrible job with what you call ESG compliant management? Yes. Is it still a really good place to go? And is it a great place to work? And are these businesses great partners to work with? Absolutely.
Yeah, and of course, when you read about the recession, I saw an article yesterday. Here's the recession. The first thing that businesses are cutting is their ESG. I said, no, come on. Like, why did you need to write that? But I guess it does play into what you said about the news in general. So
yeah,
we shouldn't expect much from the news.
That kind of takes us back to my prior point. Businesses on many levels understand that as soon as the consumer is educated into becoming a customer, they're going to stop selling their stuff unless they change. So we, WaterBears, simply want to empower our audience to make educated choices to become customers, not consumers, and stop those companies in their tracks who are just mindlessly trying to sell you more stuff.
Each time I'm in a conversation like this with somebody such as yourself, it is like finding an oasis in the middle of a desert or being able to take a deep breath in outer space. I just get such a sense of peace from this idea that, okay, there's one other person that shares some of these values, that shares some of these thought patterns, when in many aspects of our daily life, we can go days or weeks without encountering somebody else that shares those viewpoints. And then you do feel very isolated.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I mean, I'm part of a men's sports club, and none of them share these values. They are very typical American men in the exact definition that it's always been known and stereotyped around the world. I enjoy playing sports with them. It's very fun. We have a lot of fun, but we do not connect on any of this kind of, they're just going to go eat their burger and eat a steak and, drive their pickup truck. And that's the life that they want to live. So that makes you feel like, am I crazy for seeing something that nobody else sees? And when you have a community of people who see things the way you see it, it makes you feel validated. And you say, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not insane to see this. There are other people who are smart and have their hearts in the right place, and they see it too. And I think that's such a powerful force for anybody who feels alienated.
That's a very good point. But I also think playing sports with a bunch of fun guys is a massively constructive thing to do.
It is. No, it's great. It's awesome. I love them. Yeah.
Great, and I'm really happy to hear that you're playing sports with, a bunch of guys, because people need to have a good time. Like, you have to enjoy this life, this moment now, play sports with your friends. You can't find that you're going to agree with everything with every friend you play sports with.
Sure.
The beauty of our society today, and the upside of digital media, is you can be talking to people thousands of miles away who share a passion that you have, and you might not find everybody in LA across the street from your sports club, right? But you can find really interesting people now through networks like WaterBear all over the world. So you can actually do it all. You can have your family, you can have your work, you can play your sports, you can have other friends with whom you discuss environment, and further other friends with whom you do art. That is a balanced life.
How did that actually go? So you said, if the money runs out, I'm going to go get a job. How long did it take before that investment paid off? And what type of investment did you make with that money in yourself?
Well, what I did was I set up a company. That company was Off the Fence, right? It comes from Get Off the Fence, which is, get your ass in gear, make a decision, right? That's what you need. The greatest need for every startup is speed. You just need everybody to say no quickly and to say yes quickly. So I set it up, and I used the money to travel to television events and to buy rights to documentaries. And I broke even after 2 years.
And how did you come up with the concept of that business model? It seems so specific. How did you think that might work?
I remember that I didn't type. I actually hand wrote. I hand wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. I wrote about myself. I wrote about what I love. I wrote about what I care about. I wrote about what that would look like in a job. I wrote what that job would look like in a business. And then I thought, you know what I'm really good at? I'm really good at talking to people from all over the world. Why? Because they interest me. I'm curious about people. I love to know what life in South Africa is like, or in Uganda. I love to know what life in Alaska is like, or life in India. I'm going to use that curiosity and talk to people about what they're curious about. And I'm going to do all that in television because it's a really easy place, an easy community where people come from all over the world to Cannes, to these television events, and they exchange all these, amazing pieces of information and all this dialogue. And there are lots and lots of films there. So that's really, and when you think about having only $200,000 to do that, and also because I was always really bad, as I said before, at administration. So I had an assistant and myself and $200,000. It's actually not a lot when you realize how much traveling and buying and representing you have to do.
That you were able to stretch that for 2 years is remarkable. Were you earning any kind of income? That is remarkable. Were you earning
No,
revenue
I did.
along the way?
I did. I did. There were producers, a couple of producers that paid me retainers to take their stuff with me.
Yeah.
So I did have them support me and say, Ellen, I don't want to go on the road. Better you than me. You know, you can sell owls to Athens, so go sell my stuff.
Right. You were like a plugger of the TV world, but in a different way.
I
Yeah.
sure was. Yeah.
That makes so much sense. What an incredible, incredible story. And you're living proof of my central hypothesis or the thesis of this show, which is that you can find a mission and you can also be successful, that they're not mutually exclusive. I think for many people, there's this idea that if I commit to these types of values, I'm committing myself to be poor and destitute for the rest of my life. I'm just either going to be Mahatma Gandhi or Mother Teresa, or I'm just going to buy wholeheartedly into this capitalistic system and go sell tobacco to teenagers. And there's really not a lot of stuff in between, but your story is such a great template for doing something meaningful, for finding a sense of mission, and also personal empowerment, which is so, so important, and personal growth, which is so, so important. And for many people, entrepreneurship is a big part of that journey. You can't just ignore that. This is very cool to me.
Thank you. Yeah. It's definitely not an easy thing in that, you do have to understand that when you work with these kinds of stories, you have to read a lot. You come across a lot of information. There's stuff you definitely don't feel like reading or hearing. And there are techniques on how to cope with that, because you really don't want to get too many bad pieces of news on the same day. But I do think it's a very truthful and upright way of life. And I prefer that any day to a gigantic salary.
I completely agree. It's so noble. Nobility, what does that word mean? What does it mean to do the noble thing?
I don't think I'm very noble. I think I'm just very practical.
Well, we can agree to disagree on that point. I think it's quite noble. but it's also practical from a certain point of view. Yeah, that's for sure. I'm just blown away by the simplicity and the clarity of thought that you've always had. And, I think you characterize yourself as overly you care too much, but I think you care the right amount, and it shows. Do you feel when you wake up every morning a sense of purpose? Do you have that dread when you go to work in the morning, or are you excited?
Well, we have scary times at WaterBear, right? It's scary to run technology. Things can go wrong. It's scary to have a team produce live events. That could go wrong. It's scary to have investors who want to see results. Who knows how quickly things are going to grow, what's going to happen to the economy. So, no, I think I have the exact same, issues that every entrepreneur has, but I never don't want to go to work. Right? I every day, because it's also, there's a really wonderful team working at WaterBear. So, the colleagues like to see each other. And we like to hang out together. So that sense of community is there. And I must say that I don't think I could take a job where I was representing a product or selling a product or manufacturing a product or getting behind a product that I don't really think is important.
And I think so many people are right there at that moment right now. Dress for the job you want, hire yourself for the role. And one of the things that you tossed aside in the beginning was, collect that paycheck while you're building that. Do you advise that for people to say, okay, if you're in something, collect that paycheck, save your $200,000 such that, do you think in that sense the ends justify the means if you're aware that you're helping sell a product that you don't necessarily believe in, to not be too hard on yourself or to be too negative about that?
Absolutely. I think one of the worst things entrepreneurs can do is be too hard on themselves. I think most people are too hard on themselves. I also would say, sitting here in Europe, Americans are incredibly hard on themselves.
Yeah.
The Americans I know who are working 3 jobs, driving their kids to school, cooking dinner, exercising 2 hours a day. It's unbelievable what Americans do. And I think being kind to yourself is massively important. And also, don't set yourself goals that are going to make you feel awful. Like, have no money, give yourself 3
Right.
months to make a break. I don't believe in that. I've never been like that.
Right.
And
That's so
you,
true.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you use the word aware. If you're aware that you're doing this job because you need to, spend, save your equivalent of the $200,000. If you need to do that and you're going to do it via this job, be aware and do it. Because if you're aware, you don't feel depressed about the job that you're doing that's not your ideal job. The
Such
why is
wise
important.
words.
Why am I doing this job? Okay, that's why. Great. Now I'm motivated.
Such wise words. I can think of no better way to wrap up this episode. As I said at the beginning, it's been an absolute pleasure. I knew it was going to be incredible. It is incredible to just borrow an hour of your very valuable time.
It's so nice
For
to talk
those
to you.
listening, the website is waterbear.com, water and bear, BEAR, like the animal bear.com. It is a Netflix for building change. It is a Netflix where all of the content is empowering and positive and rooted in very real issues. It's an incredible concept, brilliant execution, and you don't need to take my word for that, folks, because the amount of partners that you have, the amount of support that you have is just off the charts. Incredible buzz happening around this. So again, I thank you very much, Ellen. It's been an absolute pleasure. And with that, the official podcast is over. Over.